So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. It's such a joy to be in this space, in this sacred circle. I'm Carrie Kopnick and I serve the Chaplaincy Institute as our community minister, and that is a great honor in my life. We're so glad that you come here today to join us for the ChI Talks. This is a monthly event that explores the facets of spirituality through an interfaith lens. We have this every third Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, so I hope you will mark your calendar for next month as well. We will have time at the end for questions about today's topic, but also about the Chaplaincy Institute, if anybody has questions about, in general, what we do. Little introduction. The Chaplaincy Institute provides education for those seeking to serve in hospitals, hospices, disasters, prisons, corporations, military, educational settings, as activists, and in environmental contexts. We also train spiritual companions. He is the oldest and most respected interfaith seminary in the United States, and we are recognized by the Association of Professional Chaplains. Katrina, do you want to say anything more about the seminary?
I think that was a great introduction. Most people here know the seminary quite well. And if you don't, and you want to hear more about it, I or our admissions manager, Michelle Gantz, would be more than happy to meet with you on the phone or on Zoom and tell you all about what we do. And if you haven't already attended a program, maybe you'd like to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now I'd like to take a moment to invite us to get centered, and then I'll invite our speaker to, I'll share a little bit about our speaker, and then I'll invite her to go ahead and start. So friends, today is the first day of spring, and here we are on the precipice of turning of the times, turning of the programs at the Chaplaincy Institute, and maybe some awakenings and becomings in our own lives. So let's just take a moment, touch in with self, touch in with spirit, divine, all that is, goddess, universe. Here we are. It is such a blessing to be, and it is such a blessing to be together. I'll light a candle just to remind us that the divine is with us, always with us, and the divine in each of us is present here today. Thank you. Oh, that got really dark now. Well, so our speaker today is Rivka Gevurtz. Rivka is an interfaith minister, chaplain, and spiritual director, as well as a Reiki master. Rivka serves as a member of the core faculty of the Chaplaincy Institute, overseeing the Sacred Justice Ministry curriculum thread. And Rivka has also been a part of ChI's Deep Culture Hive and a member of the Community Council. Rivka has worked for 40 years at the intersection of faith and justice, starting her interfaith work at the first residence for people with AIDS in New York City. She subsequently worked in faith-based and/or interfaith advocacy and service organizations, supporting the queer community, elders, the environment, and children. Her last job as an executive director before coming to ChI was in service to the community of Welcoming Congregations, a coalition of over 120 spiritual communities across the religious spectrum throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Rivka. It's such an honor to have you. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you all for being here. I've had the opportunity to speak with many of you over the course of the last year as we've visioned this possibility into the point at which we're now birthing it. So I just want to give you a flavor of what the afternoon will look like. I'm going to start us with a short PowerPoint to just frame where we've come from and where we envision going. But the bulk of this conversation is just indeed that, a conversation, because wisdom is a shared experience. And in some ways we are still dotting the I's, crossing the T's if you're going to come from a Western, perspective, but from a more traditional perspective, we're entering a space of shared wisdom. And so I invite you to think deeply about what you see in terms of what we're proposing. Don't be afraid to challenge us in terms of what you see that might be missing, that is important for this moment. And to share your ideas of how you think that this new certificate program can enhance our work as chaplains, community ministers, and spiritual directors. So give me just a moment here while I go ahead and get the screen share ready. Just get that set up. Okay. So we've been very blessed at ChI. We've been part of an ongoing conversation for 25 years. As Carrie said, we're the oldest interfaith seminary of this kind. And this year we celebrate our 25th anniversary. It's been 25 years of stepping outside of major academia and in being engaged in applied theology, working with people across spiritual traditions and no spiritual tradition, to really find ways of being present with those we serve, as Carrie said, whether it's in a prison or a school or street ministry. ChI clergy have been working for 25 years in service of people who live at the margins, as well as those within traditional settings. We've built a strong foundation, even back when we were meeting in person, and a good number of the people who are here now weren't with us back then, but for those who were, you'll remember that we have long had classes like Theater of the Oppressed and Eco-Ministry, and we've strived to have circle processes to ground our conversations. We've engaged in prison ministry. And even from early on, we were concerned about community ministry and social transformation. But in 2017, we decided we needed to take a deep look at ourselves and look at our role both within the organization and how we prepared students for stepping out into the larger world. And at that point, we went through what was called our Deep Culture Survey, where Patricia St. Ange, who used to be part of the core faculty, met with people who were stakeholders, who were students, who were board members, all of the different constituencies who were invested in the life of ChI. And through that process, we began to look really deeply at how we function as an organization. Through it, we developed originally the prophetic voice and social transformation as an elective, and at the same time began as the deep culture hive of looking at our organizational practices. How are we conforming to code, the conditions that determine entry into our world? And through those conversations and through those explorations, we've gone from looking at our application processes to our structures to our curriculum. And from that, we went from having the elective of prophetic voice and social transformation to having as core curriculum the Sacred Justice Ministry Intensive as one of the core intensives that people participate in. Last spring at our spring retreat, the hive met again, and we looked at where are we now? Where do we need to go now? And through that conversation, we listened to Spirit and to each other and are stepping into this new moment of creating the Sacred Justice Ministry certificate program. The intention is to build on our legacy and vision into the future. And our legacy is one of innovation. ChI's been creating new models of learning for 25 years. And so we ask ourselves the question, how do we bring together the wisdom that are the many world spiritual traditions into the view of sacred justice ministry? How will this program ground the work of healing our planet and our communities in the sacred connectedness of all? So we looked at things like, what do diverse spiritual traditions and their ancient teachings say about justice? Dominantly in this culture and in most other spirit-based programs, we look at social justice from a Christocentric hegemony, which is what our dominant social paradigm is based on. But there's wisdom to be had, as we've learned throughout our ChI global spiritual traditions and all of the different ways that we've lifted up other spiritual understandings of the world. We have an opportunity unique to ChI to explore what these ancient wisdoms have to teach us about the moment that we're living in now. That moment includes the reality that the climate crisis is going to and is impacting every form of oppression, amplifying the intersectionalities of the ways that environmental justice and social justice are exacerbated in a world of refugees, in a world of planet destruction. And that's the reality that we step into as people who walk alongside those who are marginalized, not only within the global majority, but also people who are differently abled and people who love differently and people whose body at birth does not reconcile with who they know themselves to be. So what we have to look at ourselves in the mirror with is, how do we provide spiritual care that integrates trauma-informed, culturally sensitive, and anti-oppression teachings? And what uniquely can interfaith, and specifically interfaith chaplains, ministers, and spiritual directors bring to the healing of harms to people and planet? As we had these conversations, we looked at the fact that we already have a strong foundation on which to build. So building from our existing coursework, we already have, the as a primer, but when people first join the program, the prophetic voice and ministry Moodle class that grounds us in our understanding of social identity and our understanding of microaggressions and the tensions between isms and privilege and power. We already have within culture, the ChI culture and foundations, an exploration of the role of oppression in spiritual care. We, within our global spiritual traditions 1 and 2, give people an understanding of the many different wisdoms within the spiritual world that our communities draw on and that the people we serve draw on. Up until now, Sacred Justice Ministry, has been just one of those intensives that we hold. And now it'll be known as Foundations in Sacred Justice, as it grows to be part of this new, larger certificate program. Eco-ministry and work for beloved community up until now have simply been electives. One could choose to take them or not. Within this program, they are part of the required curriculum for someone who wants to understand the interconnections between spirit, the planet, and the most marginalized communities. To that basis, that core foundation that we've been working with for some time now, we're adding 2 new classes, which are the 2 new intensives are Countering Oppression. All of a sudden, my screen just did something weird on my end, so give me a second here. Pardon me. There. Countering Oppression Through Spiritual Care, and the second one being Advocacy, Action, and Allyship. But we're adding to that weekly cohorts. In our other programs, our students meet every 2 weeks as part of their formation in cohorts. But in this program, it's going to be weekly. They'll divide their time between, as with the current cohorts, formation and conversation about the learning journey. But the alternate weeks will be peer-led learning labs and essentially think tanks for us to explore how justice and spirituality can work collaboratively to bring healing to this world. And just as with our other programs, there is a practicum component. But we want that to be in organizations that are local to each of the students, that are either in faith-based social justice or secular social justice, but that are causes that speak to their own ministry. In essence, we want to build on the program of interfaith curriculum that we've had for 25 years to empower clergy to better recognize where we and the systems we work within have contributed to harm that has been done to marginalized people, as well as been a resource to marginalized people, but to learn how to become more effective allies to those that we serve. So for the folks who haven't been in the program for a while, the design of our classes has changed since we were meeting for 1 week in a module in each given month. Now students participate in asynchronous and synchronous online learning. And within the curriculum currently, all of these different courses are already baked into the not just the one intensive for sacred justice ministry as it has existed, but in our multiple other courses. Everything from cosmology and eco-spirituality to looking at human sexuality, exploring liberation theologies and sacred justice movements, the role of intersectionality, as well as how restorative justice and peacekeeping circles can be a model for us engaging with others. What we hope is that this program will bring together our rich interfaith curriculum with an emphasis on how marginalized communities face those intersectional forms of oppression. It's all still in development, but where we are at this moment is designing courses that will meet a variety of needs. Within the countering oppression through spiritual practice sessions, we hope to include sessions on trauma-informed spiritual practices, both for the practitioner, because we are going to be working in areas that draw on our strength and our emotions and our hearts, but also trauma-informed spiritual practices that we can bring to those that we serve, whether that's in a march or sitting with somebody who is homeless, or sitting with an undocumented grandmother who's in hospital and her family can't come to visit her. What are those spiritual practices that will speak to the lived experience of those we serve? We'll look at how religion has been used as a tool of oppression, as well as exploring, active bystander and trauma-informed de-escalation techniques for truly standing alongside someone who is being confronted by oppression and somebody's prejudice. We'll look at the intersections and the ways that trauma and justice amplify one another, or the lack of justice therefore. And we'll look at religious wounding and moral injury. So often in the systems that we work within, in spite of our good intentions, the systems create harm to those we serve. And the chaplains and others who work in this intersection have to explore where the morally injurious opportunities are impacting their own lives and how they can help both avoid that experience and advocate for change within their organizations. Within the advocacy and action and allyship sessions, we're going to look at practical tools. how is movement ministry beyond just marches? A lot of people think it's just, a spontaneous gathering together, but so much goes into informing and holding sacred space to draw attention to the ills of this world. We'll look at the tensions of economic justice and environmental justice. We'll look at how important it is to step into empowering others, to decentralize our role as clergy. We are given automatically the privilege of moral authority, but it's just as important for us to learn how to step aside in true allyship to let the people who are most affected by a certain oppression have the voice that is centered and knows from lived experience where harm is done and where help is needed. We'll look at how to be the prophetic voice, the prophetic witness. How do we do public testimony and public prayer? And how do we bring our wisdom and gifts and that privilege of moral authority to initiatives of lobbying for state initiatives and measures? We'll learn how to build coalitions with other religious organizations as well as with secular nonprofits. We'll use the tools of engagement to build the world that we want to see. And so, as I said, in addition to those classes, we'll engage in weekly relational and peer-led cohorts for weekly learning. These will be collaborative learning labs that'll serve as think tanks to build advocacy tools, but also to spark new models of action and care from the unique lens of the interfaith spirituality and learning that we're going to do together, inviting in the wisdom of other traditions to inform how we come together and how we create that sense of empowerment and that sense of witness for those who we serve. And that'll be done through applying the learnings in local practicums. In addition to what we learn in the classroom, students will complete 200 hours of practicum in some sphere of sacred justice that's inspired by their own interests and values. What are you being called to be part of the healing for? And so, as we explore all of these opportunities, we're now beginning to accept applications that'll be due by June 15th. Orientation will happen sometime in July. We're going to base that in part on what is conducive for the final cohort. And similarly, the weekly meetings will also be determined in part with what will be amenable for that cohort. But then we'll enter into the cycle of life that is our ChI year. The initial weekend of learning for members of this particular cohort will start with ChI cultures and foundations in September, and we'll meet essentially every 2 months or so for Zoom classes, in addition to the Moodle classes that'll be happening throughout, and the weekly learnings that we'll do together in the collaborative learning experience, culminating a year later for this first cohort on September 20th to the 22nd with the advocacy action and allyship as the final session within the program. So that's the overview. Now we want to step into a time of inviting our shared wisdom. Where do you see the prophetic wisdom of this time leading us? What are the tools and the skills which you feel will most empower us as spiritual care providers? We live in what's now known as the Anthropocene age because of human-caused changes to our planet. Up until now, that's been led dominantly by science, but what does spirit have to guide us? How can spirit lead us to come to terms with our changing planet? And what's been left out of this conversation? I'm going to stop sharing screen now and invite us into that conversation. You can share your initial observations. You can share what questions arise for you. You can share what you find challenging about this work. This is when we get to workshop it. You know, we've got this lovely idea that we've been working on and working with various stakeholders over the last year to begin to fine tune. But this is part of our ChI community's next gift to the larger world. And so we want it to be representative of where we are in this moment and where we see the need of those that we serve centered in this conversation.
Just logistically, I put a couple of the questions in the chat, and please feel free to ask your questions in the chat or raise your hand or just go ahead and unmute and speak. We're not a super large group.
Irene.
Thank you, Rivka. That was really clear, and I appreciated the history piece. I had a sense of it, but I really appreciated seeing that somehow that through line was very helpful to me. So I've said this to Rivka already. I'm just so enthused about this because I've already sent it on to people, not just in seminary, but in I think it's a mid-ministry moment, maybe for a lot of people too, people who have gone into their ministry and are like, you know, I'm not quite the traditionalist and I'm not sure how to bridge with some of my people that are showing up or that I want to show up or whatever. So I just want to say that I can really see this working in a number of ways. Two things. One came up for me when I was a student at ChI. So I'm from the East Bay area in California. And so I'm wondering if there's a way for us to honor non-English speakers into the program. I know it has to be offered in English, and I am not suggesting it be a bilingual program. I want to make that clear. But I'm wondering if there might be a way, and this didn't have to be written, maybe it could just be part of the holding of the group, that languages besides English might be particularly honored in the practicum, so that people could work, for example, in their communities or communities with which they're allied. I speak Spanish, for example, and so that has created a bridge for me in a lot of situations. It's been really, really lovely. So, you know, it's just an idea. I don't think it's a huge idea, but it's just something that might cast a little broader net and invite folks in who might not have thought of it otherwise. And then the other thing, this is my academic self speaking, and again, I'm not pushing this very hard, but it occurs to me that having worked with grants, that one of the things I saw be really successful is that the first iteration of anything be considered a pilot. Not that we would necessarily convey that to the students. There's nothing tentative about this program. Once it starts, they finish. But that we as academicians might consider this a pilot in that, which creates a kind of researchy feedback space, maybe at points that the faculty would know much better than I to ask that information. And I feel that gives us a built-in feedback loop that's pretty reliable and would help you all fine-tune or not. You know, maybe it's fine as it is, and that can happen in a pilot. It's like, yeah, we got it the first time, awesome. But if there's fine-tuning that needs to happen, you know, your students are being invited into that discussion as you guys go along. So those are just a couple of things. But I really want to say overall how impressed I am and how much I think this represents ChI so well in the larger community, the larger seminary community and the largest religious and spiritual community and social action committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Irene. And to speak to that last part about the pilot aspects of it, that actually is been already knit into the grant applications we have applied for. We've not yet gotten either of the grants we've applied for, but we are continuing to look for appropriate grants. And it is still very much my hope that we will get some grants that are specific to allowing us to offer tuition reduction for people who are parts of marginalized communities. So speaking to your first question, yes, if people want to engage in work that is within a community that is non-English, I think, absolutely. It is hard, as you can imagine, to try and do that in terms of the actual materials and whatnot, because we're drawing on shared materials for the whole school, and we don't have the resources to do a lot of that. But from the practicums, absolutely, I think that
Right.
would be
I think
beautiful.
it's a nice compromise. I think
Absolutely.
it's a way of acknowledging that, yeah, we just have to use
Yeah.
English, and most folks at this stage of the game would have English anyway, I think. Yeah, but just to be able to mention to students, if you're bilingual or trilingual, or so many students have how many languages, there will be an opportunity for you to use that if you're called to do that.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments in the chat from Karen Ehrlichman, pilot program that is collecting data that can be used for future funding, ongoing planning and leadership development. So I think that's that back end administrative piece that we track and then can leverage. Make this more available, as Rivka said, to grow and become the healing the world needs.
Absolutely. Susan.
Thank you, Rivka. I'm not sure if at ChI you've had the opportunity to use it, but if you do get students who speak another language, Zoom has done an amazing job in translating that in real time. I've facilitated a lot of Zoom meetings where so if you're Spanish speaking, you turn on the caption feature, and it closed captions it in English, and then the English participants click English and the Spanish participants click Spanish. So everyone is reading it in their language or other languages as well. I just wanted to mention that in case you do have students who want to take the class, but they're reluctant because of a language difference.
Thank you.
And thank you, by the way. I think that the course content is invaluable. I sent in my testimonial today from the Sacred Justice Ministry class, and that's the word that kept coming up, that the class is invaluable and really necessary right now.
We live in a moment where many of the ordaining bodies and credentialing bodies are starting to ask of this for their continuing education. So the intent of this is to be accessible not only to seminarians who are starting out, but more especially to those who are mid ministry, as the word that Irene used. We're in a moment where we're all becoming much more aware of our social identities, the ways that the tension between privilege and power and oppression manifest, and just by nature of the work that we do, we're coming alongside people whose stories are multifaceted and are intersectional, and so I think it is very timely.
Thank you.
Jan.
Great to have this vision put out, and I'm so appreciative you're plowing the path here to take us in this terrain. I really have been sitting with this, I guess, from the perspective of my social change life, which has been kind of separate, but yet mixed with my, ministerial life. And I think the piece that I'm wanting to really lift up as being so really central in all of this is, it's more than, having the opportunity to give sermon and have your prophetic voice. It's like there's a calling to unearth here. And I think that right now, the world that we're living in has transformed before our very eyes in ways that just really changed the whole platform, even of life itself.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people are feeling like, I'm called to something. I want to, come alongside and work for a just, sustainable, peaceful world. And I don't, know what piece of that. So I think a lot of people are swirling in the feelings of that, but yet also just not knowing how to tease that out into calling. And I think it's a process that's somewhat, akin to when we were finding our ministerial calling specifically of, that in itself is a formation process that we really put a lot of emphasis on and cultivate and bring forward. And I think it's a similar kind of thing with this. And when I think about my formation, I mean, it's like I could put those words on it now, but I bumbled my way into things back then, but I can say that it had a lot to do with, deep conversations, values, putting the values forward, helping tease that out, bringing arts alongside of it, um, singing, in social change context is everything, and
Mm.
understanding, the music and culture around. There's just capacities that I think we're called upon as humans to cultivate. Now, what's the special place of a seminary, that has been really putting at the forefront, how do we bridge differences? How do we make room at the table for everybody? So, there's a certain way that this has been, it's been part of our DNA, but it's like we're called to evolve that DNA to meet this moment, is sort of a way to say it. And I think that we're called to be people of vision, to connect with our own sense of, what does it mean to be alive right now? And, and yes, it has to do with one-on-one conversations, and it's come into spiritual direction sessions where people have been struggling with the world and its changes and their fear about it. But it's also broader. It's being exemplars. It's being walking around cells in the body of the larger transformation. And I really feel that I think there's an architecture here that could support that and bring some processes alongside that. I'm still trying to figure out what that might be. But I feel like that's the area where I feel lifting the piece of that interiority, where we're meeting our gifts, our inner hints and guesses with what the world needs and how spirit is coming alongside of us, to make it all work. So I think there's something very exciting. And to me, the specifics, some of the things that resonated less were having to do with the specific pieces of lobbying or things like that, that I think that's one strategy. But I think there's so many strategies. And just to really make room for people, whatever their temperament is, because there's a lot of people who are drawn to ministry whose temperament is of such that they're probably not going to be in that role. So we want the message to be, hey, there's so many niches, there's so many ways that we as people and as clergy can live into this moment and help this evolutionary transformation that this moment calls for within our own lives and how we live it. And then as we find our ministerial legs with it, we have tremendous opportunities to be exemplars, way showers, and bringing love, into motion. Okay, well, I'm going off on a total riff now, but I really was inspired to reflect on my life and things that I didn't understand when I was living in them before my ministry piece. But you know what? I brought Gandhi quotes when I had my first engagement with civil disobedience, and I brought Gandhi quotes to jail because I didn't know what else to do. I had no other point of connection. But in a sense, that was perfect. That's probably
Exactly.
the best best contribution I could make now. So anyway, but I think this personal thing, it's every person, it's a discovery, it's an unfolding, and we need to be talking with each other. We need to be hearing what other people are doing. The peer lab sounds great, but I hope you'll have some mentors in there too, because sometimes we need a little uplift and perspective. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that is also built into the construct, is that in addition to the program director, myself, there will be mentor faculty who live within social justice and understand the work that will be supporting the students as we move forward. Empowerment is what this is about. And one of the things that I remember many years ago, because I've been doing this justice work for a long time, and you can get really burnt out on it. In part because we get so stuck in our head and the facts of what this scientific thing has told us, and people don't want to hear that. And so they kind of put on blinders or they put their head in the sand. What needs to happen is a reawakening of heart and a reawakening of spirit. And who better to do that than particularly interfaith clergy who are meeting people where they're at. The opportunity that we have, because we aren't focused on one particular dogma, of being present to the trepidations and the power and wisdom that is brought by those we come alongside, can help cultivate that hope and that love that at the moment is missing in many discussions about where we are in a world that's fraught with division and with destruction. So I think we do have a very important role as clergy, to come alongside those who are struggling with the new realities. Any other questions or observations?
I'm going to share from the chat. Hakeem says, peace and blessings. I'm off camera at the moment and muted, but tuning in closely because of dinner. We get that, right? I'm a Black queer spiritualist who is rooted in earth-based and faith traditions of the African diaspora. I'm excited to hear about this program and its interdisciplinary model. I found out about this gathering when looking for a chaplaincy program, but I'm very excited to hear about this and very interested in applying in addition to exploring my initial interests, chaplaincy. I want to know what financial aid and scholarships might be available. And we might want to turn that over to Katrina, Rivka, I don't know.
Yes.
Our dean of everything.
I can certainly speak to that. I just sent a quick email out in reply also. Michelle Gantz and myself, I'm the dean of the seminary. Michelle is the admissions manager. We would love to talk to anybody who has questions about how to make this work, questions about how the program structure is. Rivka can tell you everything about all the content, but we're supporting her in helping people find out all the details about it. So financial aid, we have limited financial aid that comes from our resources. As Rivka said, we're applying for grants if we, anytime, actually, I should say Rivka has been applying for grants, thank you. Looking for ways to support people's participation in that through the grant funding that we hope to get specifically. But we have our own sources of support for folks who, particularly people from marginalized community. There are funds available for that in particular to support your attendance at the Chaplaincy Institute. We sometimes have work study arrangements also for people that have time they want to contribute in exchange for tuition reduction. We'll tell you more about it in person, one-on-one. We'd love to tell you whatever you'd like to hear that helps you discern whether this is something that you'd like to do. And yeah, reach out to admissions or my direct email. You can reach out to, we can put all of our contact information there. Rivka, myself, or Michelle, we can all talk to you. I'll put my email in the chat also.
It is my highest ambition that we develop a grant relationship with a foundation who sees the value of scholarships so that we can make this work as accessible as possible to the people who are most affected by the oppression that occurs within our society.
It's really important.
Joe says in the chat, I see openings and opportunities for expansion within MSW and doctorate programs. The sacred piece may be more appealing to these new admissions. Have you thought about networking to these schools for additional practicums or more inclusion in student identities?
We actually began networking when we were at Parliament of World Religions, as a matter of fact. Katrina started letting people know while we were there that this was coming down the pike. And so there are several other seminaries who are excited to hear about this. We are also going to be reaching out to different denominational bodies because multiple denominations are asking this of their clergy, that their continuing ed credits have a focus on justice. We know that the Association of Professional Chaplains requires 50 credits of CPE a year, and this program's 12. So that's, right there covers, a nice chunk for them. So yes, there are definite plans to reach out to multiple institutions as well as multiple associations to let them know that this is available for continuing education, as well as folks who are still in seminary process.
I'll also jump in on that. Joe, I think you're also asking about programs that are not seminaries and that are not looking at training in spiritual care, which is a really interesting question. And it would be great to hear more from your perspective, because I know you're in that field, what you envision that could look like. Because I haven't thought about that, because spiritual care is such a defined field that we are working within here at ChI, but connecting to other places that might want to integrate what we're doing, it would be a great idea. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that from you later, like how you see that might work.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess I can just briefly share that as I've been reflecting, it seems like throughout my education, there has been this huge missing piece of the spiritual aspects, maybe not so explicitly taught or offered. And I feel like now is a big window of opportunity that students and staff would be on board to this expansion.
Interesting. Yeah, it's totally true.
Definitely merits further exploration. Absolutely.
And a bigger umbrella, if we look at the healing of the world, the thing that the Chaplaincy Institute is here to do, I think, just me, it's going to come from spiritual places, that deep connection, not the divisions, but the deeper all is one. So get off my soapbox, but yeah, and we are the leader in doing this. There's not another interfaith seminary doing this. So
Right.
yeah, it's called for, it's needed. Rivka saw the need, and here we are.
Yeah. Now, when we surveyed the different social justice certificates and degree programs around the country, pretty much every other one was either secular or Christocentric, based in a particular denomination. No one else is doing it from a global spiritual traditions perspective, and a perspective that honors the wisdom of spiritual but not religious folk. We do have a very unique voice in this arena. Lou.
When Joe's idea got me thinking as well. As many of you know, I come from the engineering background combined with chaplaincy, and in the last 2 years, it's the first time I can ever recall that universities are starting to require mandatory classes in engineering justice in terms of environmental, which I've never seen before in 30, 35 years. And because now that's mandatory for the undergrads, they also have capstone projects often for senior year and such. So that could be, it would be a stretch, but it could be an interesting networking, reaching out to some of those programs, because I bet there might be some young folks that would love to dive into this.
I think that's fascinating. And I think we're in a unique moment where we're getting it that the old ways of doing things haven't worked. And we're in a moment where we're looking at how do we bridge difference? How do we bring into balance the stressors that we see around us, and also the sense of hopelessness and isolation that we see around us? Spirit is the vehicle for hope. And so bringing that into every sphere, I think creates an opportunity for us to shift the conversation from it just being so many parts per million that we've already well exceeded in terms of our climate effect, to a conversation of how do we live with integrity with ourselves and with each other and with the planet. Any final questions? I would just ask that those of you who are here, consider yourselves enlisted, christened, whatever form it means for you, to be people who share this good news. People who let your friends know that this is an opportunity that is coming into fruition, and invite them to check out the website. The website has been updated with the information about the new program, as well as we now have the application ready to go. So folks are welcomed to talk with any of us, to look at the website, to begin the application process. It will be first come, first serve in terms of our interviewing process. And we look forward to having a robust cadre of folk beginning this summer and fall.
Very exciting. Mm-hmm.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for all that you've done today, Rivka, to help us understand, and all the work that you've done. Thank you so much, friends, for being here today. It's such a blessing to be in this community and this group, and a joy to sit in this circle together. I will stay on a little while if anybody has questions about the Chaplaincy Institute. I'm happy to, or just questions, or have a need to chat, I'll be here. But let's go ahead and extinguish our candle here, holding a moment of sacred silence and sacred presence. Blessings to you all on this beautiful first day of spring. May you be well and may you be whole. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for this.